century was hijacked by the pharmaceutical industry. They don't only make the well-known deadly drugs, but they also control nutritional information. And the reason being is because they've reduced the average person's mentality about nutrients down to pills, called vitamins and mineral pills. And 85% of those pills are made by the pharmaceutical industry. Now, it gets a little tricky, because sometimes when you go into the health shop and you look at the bottle, it has, "Dear brothers and sisters, here we are in Colorado in the mountains, former hippies. And we love the earth. And you should take this because we're one of you." But the reality is 85% of those are coming out of the pharmaceutical industry. So we didn't really learn very much about nutrition or about the importance of nutrition from the people in charge of it, quite simply because they don't want you to know. They don't want you to understand that it all is very simple, that every drop of life comes from the sun. Then you have other industries, the dairy industry and the meat industry. Did a terrific job. They started well before any of us in this room were born, 100 years ago or so, marketing. And some of the ways they've marketed is quite shrewd. My wife grew up 6,500 miles away from me in a little town in Sweden. And I said, "Honey, when you were a little child, what was the only free thing you got?" What was it? Milk. Now, why was it they were giving us pints of milk? And by the way, the teachers, who looked gigantic and certainly knowledgeable when you were small, were looking at you from way above and saying to you, "You better drink milk or your bones are going to crumble." I remember in the catechism studies as a child, whenever they talked about that, I thought about Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, those towers crumbling down. So boy, I didn't only drink 2 or 3 free pints a day at school. When I got home, and my mother had every single day, 5, 6 days a week, a big cake for me, I washed it down with what? You and I didn't want our bones to crumble. And ironically, real science, little bits of this slip out here and there now, tell us that the #1 food that causes osteoporosis and much of the arthritic conditions we have, and certainly the #1 cause of cancer, is milk and the things we make from milk. Yes, the #1 cause of cancer. Not far from here, my colleague Dr. Campbell did over half a century of work, and his objective was to see what caused disease. Now, as a guy who grew up like me, thinking that meat and dairy was not only good for you, but a necessity, it took him a long time before he realized that what was causing most of our deaths, be it diabetes, be it heart disease, be it cancer, was those 2 non-foods. So his research indicated that casein, a protein in milk, yes, raw milk too, people, even the whole wallet raw milk, can you imagine that? Even the expensive whole wallet raw milk, is the #1 dietary cause of cancerous tumors. What type? Every type. And by the way, it actually registered as having more to do with all forms of cancer than cigarettes does with lung cancer. Did you hear what I just said to you? If I said to you lung cancer, you'd say cigarettes. His 50 years of research as the most noted scientist who's ever lived in nutrition said to us, every form of cancer has a higher correlation with milk and all the things we make from milk than cigarettes do to lung cancer. Now, that's a shocking statement, but doesn't mean that meat isn't a big problem too. I had a young man, we spoke just before I talked tonight, and I said to him, you know, it's quite simple. There's 2 diseases that aren't diseases. One is called cardiovascular disease. The other is called diabetes type 2. These are not diseases. These are lifestyle choices. If you choose to live the lifestyle you were taught to live, you're going to end up with one of those problems. We are still #1 in America. Let's give ourselves a hand. Not on many other levels, but this one we are. We are #1 in dying from heart disease and stroke. Because we really, 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 really like the idea of eating those non-foods. Diabetes, which everyone thinks who doesn't know better, is a sugar problem, is first a fat problem. What happens is all kinds of fats, and certainly animal fat, saturated fat, smothers a cell. When the cell is covered and glucose, one of the three major foods for cells, cannot go in, it hangs out in the blood, and when it hangs out in the blood, it attacks the pancreas, it runs back through it again, and you end up with pancreatic dysfunction. After you, in fact, have the fat problem cause of diabetes, then every time you look at any form of sugar, after you've already hit the red button, your blood sugar goes through the roof, and it's now a fat and a sugar problem. That's why if you look at the groups that have the highest incidence, African Americans is one example, Hasidic Jews, and look at their diets that have the highest amount of animal fat in it, they by far, markedly, have the highest amount of diabetic conditions in this nation. So all of these things are clearly scientifically validated, and any serious doctor or scientist who knows what the truth is will tell you the same thing that I'm telling you. He has a wonderful film here called Eating. If you haven't seen that film, that's enough to knock you on your ass. You can give that to people who don't believe a word about any of this. And it's going to knock them on their ass, I can tell you. Because the truth of the matter is, here are doctors, just like all of we used to be, who bought into all of the things we were taught as children, who were dying themselves, made the change to vegan diets, and healed themselves, and thank God now, as doctors can put hundreds and thousands of other people on these diets. Now, I've had a very interesting vantage point for 30 years as the director of Hippocrates, the oldest natural health organization on earth. Our founders started this after the Harvard doctors